Check, check.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. You can tell it's the beginning of the year. I think we're all still getting started, but we're gonna get started today. I am here today. Our chair now has a conflict. But I've got an announcement about that in a little bit. So welcome to our January 23rd, 2025 Social Equity Working Group meeting. We're gonna call this meeting to order at 9:35. Before we get started, I'm going to ask our interpreter today to introduce themselves and walk us through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting.
Good morning. Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app from a cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete: para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles, haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom desde su celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most of any county in the United States. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now we're going to review the meeting process for both working group members as well as members of the public who wish to participate. Working group members, I think everybody knows. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and we will call on you. In front of you are iPads. They should be loaded with today's agenda and supporting materials. You may have noticed that as we're starting to get ready for the building move, we took down that center monitor. So now we've got these two on the sides and of course your iPad touchscreen. And then before we ask our clerk to provide us a quick reminder on how public comments work, I would ask if we could keep our public comments to 2 minutes so that we can get through all the items and discussion on our agenda today.
Thank you, Chair. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. If you are a member of the public here in the room and would like to provide comments on an item, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk. If you're a member of the public joining us on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand during the item you'd like to comment on. The raise hand feature can be found on the Zoom toolbar for those who are joining via computer or by entering *9 for those joining via telephone. The clerk will call on members of the public, first followed by virtual commenters. Commenters will be called by name or by the last 3 digits of your telephone number for those joining via telephone. And I will now pass it back to the chair.
Thank you, Kat. Do members of the working group have any comments, questions on procedures before we continue? Okay. So we're going to start with item number 1. Do we have any public comments for non-agendized?
Yes, we have two public comments in person and one online. First public comment we have from Purita Javier.
Good morning. Thank you, SANDAG, letter of December 4th, 2024, from my doctor, Sharp Hospital. My patient, Purita Javier, requests my documentation in regards to how her surrounding environment affects her health. She continues to have significant anxiety and regards to the possible health effects related to air quality around her home. Her neighbors have a kiln, the use of which may have contributed to adverse symptoms, if not to her health physically, then psychologically. She lives in fear in her own home and avoid being outside. This anxiety has contributed to increased togetherness and elevated blood pressure. Appreciate your review and please take into consideration the decision regarding the same.
Her name is Purita Javier. My name is Cesar Javier, the husband, also a victim of toxicity, west bank of Choyas Creek, City Heights jurisdiction, San Diego City. We are here not to condemn anyone's failure or mistake. Ours self-imposed learners and teachers based on our observations, based on our empirical ideas, based on our experiments, we voice to you a subject, equity. We are here also to voice this handicap in governance, particularly in the core city of the region. You must have watched and heard the State of the Nation we call City Address by the Honorable Mayor Tad Gloria. He expressed sympathy. This is all about equity to the LA crisis. Empirically, he said, we sympathize with the Los Angeles crisis. There was a gap, and that gap is he did never mention the crisis besetting District 8, Tijuana River issue. He also missed the hotspot on air pollution in the city of San Diego. Why? Why? Is that governance? Or just campaigning like what CDC Heights NGO?
Thank you. Your time has expired. And we have one more public comment online. Tony Cruz, you may speak.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Tony Cruz. I am a policy manager on the clean transportation team at San Diego Gas and Electric. I am speaking today because I want to share with you an opportunity we have for community-based organizations to submit proposals for marketing, education, and outreach services to help us with our newly launched TEAS program. The TEAS program stands for Transportation Electrification Advisory Services. And this program is aimed to help medium and heavy duty fleets in the region electrify. And we're eligible customers include small businesses, local governments, tribal communities, transit agencies. So we want to make sure that we are reaching most of the underserved communities in San Diego. So that's why, again, we are looking to receive proposals from community-based organizations that can do the marketing, education, and outreach services needed to reach these communities and some of these entities. So we look forward to getting some proposals and spreading the word. So I'll be sharing the information with staff so they can distribute to you and to the appropriate organizations in our region. Thank you so much.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. Do any working group members have any questions or comments on items that are not on our agenda today? Okay. I will share a few updates. So February, we will have 2 meetings for this working group. The first is going to be the joint working group that's going to take place on Thursday, February 13th. It's going to be at the Central Library again. Hopefully you all already received that information and it's in your calendars. We are going to keep our regularly scheduled meeting on Thursday, February 27th as well. So 2 meetings in February. And for those CBOs who participated in the Vision Zero efforts, we finally, I think these are materials that you all were waiting for, but they are in the back. So before you leave, if you could see Rachel.
Bundle of Spanish and English mini magazines. So thanks everyone who helped us create these during the Vision Zero outreach. We finally have them. And if you unfold them, it's a poster on the backside. So grab a bag or 2 on your way out and use them at outreach events throughout the year. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll now proceed to approving our agenda item number 2, which is the November 21st Social Equity Working Group meeting minutes. Do we have any comments from members of the public on this item?
Yes, Chair, we have one in-person comment from Cesar Javier.
To tell our story from the grassroots, I stand here. Again, not to comment, ma'am, but perhaps in our effort to bring about all about this historic recording, which is to be approved as minutes. In our exposure in all meetings for the whole year of 2024, I believe that this is a very important item. Example, governing body meeting at the Air Pollution Control District. Look what happened to our Tijuana River issue. Look what happened to this hotspot happening now, hotspot city of San Diego. These are lessons that should be placed in the minutes so that members and planners and thinkers, public, GOs, NGOs would have that benchmark all the time when they gather. And that would remind them, where did they stop thinking? And supposed to proceed with more reinvigorated ideas and solutions. This is all about SANDAG, which we are very thankful because we discovered this premier planning group. We are supported by the federal. In fact, they mandated you, us. We now call us because we are here connected with you, engaged with you to inspire you, bring you up, lift you up in a hope that you will have clean air to breathe and make a very clean decision, which we need at this very time, state, and condition. This is an emergency which my city cannot recognize because they want to campaign, and not governing. Thank you, SANDAG.
Thank you, and that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Do members of this working group have any comments or questions about the minutes? Okay, just as a reminder, you do not have to have been present in order to vote on this item. May I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Thank you. I have a motion by Carol. Can I have a second? Thank you. Second by Marjana. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposition? Okay, this motion is unanimously approved. Moving on to our next item. To kick us off, Natasha Dulik and Samaya Elder from SANDAG are going to share an update on the development of a long-term vision for climate action in the region and ask this group for feedback on the draft greenhouse gas reduction measures. Thank you, Samaya and Natasha.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Social Equity Working Group members. Thank you for having us today. My name is Samaya Elder. I'm an associate planner on SANDAG's climate team, and I'm joined today by Natasha Dulik, also an associate planner on SANDAG's climate team. We're here today, as Paula mentioned, to share an update with you on our EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, which you last heard about in September of 2024. So we're here again providing an update. We're also here to seek your feedback on the work our team has been doing to create greenhouse gas reduction measures for one of these EPA-funded deliverables. So on our agenda today is, first I'll start by providing an update on the progress we have made on one element of that grant, which is the Regional Climate Action Roadmap. That's our focus today. And then I'll go into how we created the greenhouse gas reduction measures that we'll be sharing later on in the presentation. And then we'll conclude with next steps, of course. So to provide some background on the roadmap that we're talking about today, back in September of 2023, SANDAG was awarded a planning grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, which is supporting the development of this report along with 2 other deliverables. The roadmap will serve as a comprehensive vision to support regional collaboration to combat climate change. So I want to highlight that this is not just things SANDAG can do. Rather, it is representing what many different agencies and organizations throughout the region could do to combat climate change. So it's really a comprehensive, collaborative regional vision. The roadmap builds on the Priority Climate Action Plan, which you may recall us talking about previously with this group that was completed back in March of 2024. But this roadmap will include an updated regional greenhouse gas inventory, regional greenhouse gas projections out to 2050, as well as economy-wide greenhouse gas reduction targets, which will align with state goals. It also includes measures and actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from 7 sectors. Those are listed on the right hand of the screen, and you'll hear more about those in just a minute. And then lastly, the roadmap will also be looking at benefits to environmental justice communities, reductions in air pollution that would occur if these measures were implemented, and anticipated workforce needs. So now that you've heard a little bit about the roadmap contents, we're going to delve into the process we went through and we're still going through to create these measures. So back in July of 2024, we hosted a regional climate table workshop, which I believe some of you were able to attend, and thank you again for participating. That included representation from, as I mentioned, CBOs, but also local jurisdictions, public agencies, environmental groups and advocates, tribes, and others to hear ideas for measures and gather input on climate priorities in the region. We then spent the next several months compiling and assessing the information that we had gathered and conducting additional research to supplement it, including looking at existing local climate efforts. And then in October, we had meetings with technical stakeholders to help us further develop our greenhouse gas reduction measures, so that initial list. We also have numerous ongoing activities that are helping us get feedback on measures and climate priorities. And these include interagency meetings with local government climate staff and other public agency stakeholders, partnerships with CBOs to conduct community outreach. So we're currently partnered with Bayside Community Center, Mid-City Can, and Urban Collaborative Project, which has been really successful and we're really grateful for. And then we're also conducting lots of presentations, much like the one today, at working groups, committees, and other types of groups. So with that process of how we created them in mind, let's move on to the actual draft measures. So Natasha will be sharing the measures for each sector covered in the roadmap in just a minute, as well as some examples of corresponding actions and objectives. However, I definitely want to note that the measures are very comprehensive. They start on page 10 of your agenda packet today if you'd like to take a look. So we're not able to capture everything in today's presentation, but what we do welcome feedback at the end of our presentation on what we're about to walk through. You're also encouraged to read the measures on your own and email us comments which Natasha will be talking about at the end of our presentation as well. I also want to acknowledge that these are very much still drafts. We're here today seeking feedback. And just another reminder highlighting that these measures are intended to represent a wide variety of stakeholders in the region. So lots of types of agencies and organizations that could be implementing these projects to combat climate change. It's not just SANDAG. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Natasha.
Thanks, Maya. All right, so like she said, I'm going to dive into all our different sectors and their accompanying measures. So I'll start with transportation, which measures include continuing and growing many of the key projects and programs that are already underway in our region. So these measures look like increasing public transit use, expanding active transportation like walking and biking, expanding flexible fleet services like neighborhood EVs and micromobility options, continuing and expanding transportation demand management programs such as van pools to be able to reduce vehicle miles traveled, increasing the adoption of zero-emission vehicles, and then finally reducing fuel use from idling vehicles. So think about roundabouts and implementing curb management strategies. So this next slide has two sectors. And just to note, because the future ones look kind of similar, the measures are color-coded here on the screen, and in the right corner, there's those icons that correlate to those colors. So I'll start with electricity, which is here in blue. We just have the one measure to decarbonize the regional electric grid. And this would include things like increasing participation in fully renewable electricity options, as well as increasing the generation of distributed renewable energy throughout the region. And then for our building sector, we have two measures in gray, and those are increasing the electrification of buildings and then increasing energy efficiency of buildings for those that are already electrified. And then for both of the buildings measures, we would be looking at municipal, residential, and then non-residential or commercial buildings. Moving on to another two sectors, we have natural and working lands and waste and materials management. So first, for natural and working lands, we have three measures, this top row in green, and these are specifically looking at conserving and preserving our ecosystems in our region, and the measures would act to capture carbon and seek to act as sinks. So the first measure is to conserve marine and wetland ecosystems. And then we have conserve forests, shrublands, and chaparral ecosystems. And then lastly, increase urban canopy cover, which would look to prioritize planting in environmental justice communities. Then our next sector here we have is waste and materials management. And we have three sectors as well in purple on the bottom. And these would seek to limit waste and reduce emissions from operations in our region. So these measures include divert waste from landfills, that would include organic waste, as well as waste from construction and demolition. And then we have a measure to reduce landfill emissions through increased methane capture at our landfills. And lastly, we have a measure to reduce emissions from water and wastewater treatment facilities in our region. So this slide, we have our last two sectors, agriculture and industry. And for agriculture, we have four here in orange on the left side, looking at best practices to reduce emissions and expand or conserve our ag lands. So these measures include reduce agricultural operations emissions, looking at equipment and just more efficient options, expanding urban farming in the region, so thinking about expanding community gardens, conserving agricultural lands, and then last measure is to manage soil health to sequester carbon, so improving our overall management, soil management practices. And then last but not least, our last sector is industry on the right in this red-brown color. We have two measures, and while I do want to note we don't have a huge industrial sector in San Diego, there are still ways to reduce emissions. So that would look like reducing energy intensity of industrial facilities, mainly focusing on increasing our overall energy efficiency at these facilities in the region. And then last we have is reduce fugitive and short-lived climate pollutants and emissions. And for those who don't know, fugitive emissions are those that are unintentionally released, like leaks or discharges from equipment or facilities. So that wraps up our draft measures for our 7 sectors in the roadmap. So now I'll look at some next steps for the measures and the outreach we're doing. So first off, we will be releasing a public survey in the coming months to be able to seek more input on our reduction measures. This will be a region-wide survey with a focus on residents of low-income and disadvantaged communities. And we will have this available digitally online, but we'll be offering printed copies at outreach events that we're doing in partnership with the CBOs. We'll be hosting another climate table as well next month in February to receive additional in-person input. And then we aim to finalize our reduction measures and supporting actions this quarter after wrapping up all the outreach that I mentioned above and that Samaya had mentioned. And then lastly, we're looking to publish the draft roadmap and host another climate table this summer, and then look to come back to you all with updates along the way. So the big call to action today, as we both mentioned, we're looking for input on these draft measures. So we're happy to take any questions or comments that you have today on the measures that I went through. But if you'd like to take more time, like Samaya said, we do have the measures in your staff report. So feel free to look those over and send any questions or comments you have to us to this email here on the screen by the end of the month. And if you need a day or two extra, just let us know. And with that, this is our information again. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to your input.
Thank you, Natasha and Samaya. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, Chair, we have one public comment. Cesar Javier, you may come up.
Thank you, SANDAG. And thank you for your fresh and young inputs. Laudable. Please continue. Yes on this effort. Yes and yes, but please be hurry. Please consider tips. Keyword Arasti. It must be available, it must be responsive, adequate, simple, timely, efficient, and effective. If your program passes through this treatment plan, Eureka, we can never defeat nature. We can never defeat what happened to Tijuana River issue, but we can make ourselves protected. We can only protect us, the living and the non-living things. SICA is all about this. Protection of the air we breathe, protection of the water we drink, protection of the land where we plant food, protection of, that includes the ocean, the sea, which is bountiful near the fire crisis. I do not know if you can get my point there. We have the land use, we have the environment, we have the Proposition 65, etc., to fulfill the lifetime dream of this enactment of SECA, Environmental Quality Act. That must be our Bible. We can never defeat nature, but we can only protect humans and the thing. Those are tips. We do not compete with you guys, thinkers, but probably like the stoplight and the green light and the yellow light to remind us, oops, prepare, whether to proceed or to stop.
Thank you, and your time has expired. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Do members of the working group have any comments or questions for our presenters today? Lisa?
Hello, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. So much information, right, to digest, and just some initial reactions, particularly under the transportation section. It says increased public transit use, and I think appropriate framing would also be enhance public transportation efficiencies and active collaboration with MTS so that the result is increased public transit use. And then for San Isidro, in particular, and the border region, active collaboration with governmental agencies and coalitions that are seeking ways to increase quality, not only air, but water quality. So those two things are colliding, as everyone is aware of. But without conversations and connecting with those border-focused coalitions that will require that collaboration, that binational collaboration, and funding, right? On exploring dollars that can be used on both sides of the border in order to address the issues. For San Isidro's air quality, reducing border wait times will have a direct positive impact on our air quality. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. We do have authority to implement as one of the categories that we address for each measure. So yeah, we would love to hear more feedback on that, and as well as the transportation one as well. And incorporating different funding options, that's another one of the categories that we address for the measures.
Anyone?
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. You're going to publish the draft roadmap in the summer. What happens after that? When is the final approved? And then what's the timeline for the actual investments?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. So it's not going to be completed probably until fall. So once we release the draft, we'll be again doing another big push to look for comments, feedback on all the other sections aside from just the measures which we're talking about today. It's also the timing. Big picture is in line with the 2025 regional plan. It's definitely a supporting document to that. So we're looking at making sure we're on track with all of those regional plan milestones as well.
Okay.
So it'll be done by the end of, sorry, short answer, it'll be done by the end of the year, probably early fall.
Okay. And then does the EPA give comments back to the agency, or what happens once the plan is actually there?
Yeah, so since it's grant funded by the EPA, we'll be submitting it. They, I believe, are able to provide comments, but we're kind of working with them throughout the process to ensure that we're meeting all of the grant deliverable requirements. So, for example, when we went through this process for the Priority Climate Action Plan last year, they accepted our deliverable, but that would be kind of the final certification process, so to speak.
Okay. And then do you have to apply again to get funding for the plan, or?
They haven't stated that any implementation funding will be made available specifically for what they call these comprehensive climate action plans. So the title of ours specifically is the Climate Action Roadmap. So we're keeping an eye on it. And as Natasha mentioned, one of the sections of kind of the larger roadmap document, which you'll see this summer when the draft is published, is looking at funding sources, particularly outside of the EPA, since they have not stated that they will make funding available. So welcome any feedback on that too.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Upon looking at it, I mean, I don't have any comments, but I'm more of a question. So upon looking at the different strategies that are in this document, what comes to my mind is this involves a lot of different government agencies, right? Even beyond the local context. So I'm just wondering how they were included in the conversations to create this document. And then to kind of piggybacking off Belen's question, this is kind of the purpose of this document is to serve, I guess, as a resource, right, for the agencies to find ways to get closer and meeting our climate goals. It's not necessarily a document that has any kind of teeth or anything like that. It's more of a guide, right? If the agencies or local government is seeking to reduce greenhouse emissions or get closer to climate goals, to be a roadmap.
Okay. Yeah, two really good questions. So on the first part regarding interagency collaboration, that's a great point. And so that's why our outreach for this plan has been really extensive, because we need that buy-in, right, of all the agencies that we're saying could implement these types of projects, depending on just kind of, our respective levels of jurisdiction and authority and things like that. So I mentioned a couple slides back that we've been having regular, okay, sorry, it's not working. But a couple slides earlier in the presentation, we've been having regular interagency meetings, and that has included climate sustainability planning staff from local governments. In addition to those, all those folks and more. So I'm thinking, you know, the the Air Pollution Control District and San Diego Community Power and other types of kind of similar public agencies have been included in our climate tables, and we have one-off meetings to discuss, you know, specific sectors or measures that they could really provide or lend expertise on. So we definitely are conscious of that, and kind of related to your next question, that's correct. Nothing in this plan would be required to be implemented. The way that I really like to think about it is kind of a menu of options. Like we're creating this really comprehensive menu of options for the region and then making that available to all these different types of folks that could be working on then subsets of the plan to kind of reduce our overall emissions. So do you want to add anything, Keith?
Hey, good morning. I just want to add to Samaya. My name is Keith Greer. I'm the Deputy Director for Environment and Climate here. So Samaya was talking about the regional plan and this climate action vision. And it's a vision, it's not a plan. It's what we want to aspire towards. How those relate, the regional plan has a sustainable community component to it. The climate vision has many different sectors, some of which the regional plan covers, such as transportation, some of which it doesn't, agriculture, industry, et cetera. But all those sectors contribute to GHG, and all the measures are helping to reduce the GHG. So the implementation of the vision will consist of both implementation of our regional plan for those measures that are covered, and then for the vision, looking for funding opportunities and partnerships with others who are in control of that sector, such as building efficiency. SANDAG doesn't do that, but our partner agencies do. So as funding comes up, we will direct the funding, either something SANDAG will do or direct it to our partners for them to implement. So that's why it's a vision, and that's why we're kind of hoping in the future we'll tie the regional plan to the vision together and ultimately reduce carbon in San Diego.
Other comments, questions? Lisa and then Claire.
It would be really helpful, I think, for me and for feedback purposes, what SANDAG does have in their control and what MTS does have in their control, so that we can really focus on the things that are doable in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And you know, thinking about all of the information that will be provided for each of these measures, we're still in the early phases. So I think that's a great point. We can certainly include that in the narrative leading up to it. You know, what does kind of the different levels of authority in the San Diego region look like?
Thank you for this presentation. Obviously, this topic we all really care a lot about, and it's critical, you know, especially as we enter into some uncertain times. I have several comments and questions, so I'm just gonna put it all out there. I don't expect necessarily responses to everything, but kind of piggybacking off what Lisa mentioned in your first comment around collaboration with our neighbors in Mexico. You know, if we're thinking about just like our region, that does include our border region, and you know, we all know kind of the transit chaos that happens at our border and the amount of emissions that are happening in that area, and making sure that we're in collaboration to address that. I think without that, you know, there will be challenges in terms of reducing emissions, especially in San Ysidro. Another point, a couple points around agriculture is there was a piece about land access and, you know, increasing access to land for urban farms and things like that. And there's definitely a challenge for farmers or aspiring farmers just around like costs, right? And so if we are looking towards a future where we have abundant food in our region that is not contributing to the climate crisis, access to land is going to be really important. And so I think having something in the plan around that is important. The San Diego Food System Alliance, San Diego Food Vision 2030 has a lot of great information in there if you haven't already seen that.
And then I think there's also just a general piece around education, particularly as it relates to gas in our homes and in commercial use in restaurants and things like that, right? Gas stoves. There's been a lot of kind of marketing around gas as the way that we produce our food. And so there's actually a lot of pushback to switching to electric or induction. And so I think it's going to be really important to have education around that, both for community members and for businesses. We've seen that in our community. And then land use, thinking about industry, you know, in environmental justice communities, we have a lot of industry, and that's what's contributing to a lot of our air quality issues. And a lot of that is related to land use decisions that were made decades ago. And now when decisions are being made about new businesses coming in, the answer is, oh, well, it's fine because the zoning is correct, rather than saying, oh, maybe we need to switch the zoning so we don't continue to have more polluting businesses coming into our neighborhoods. And then my final points are just around resources, right? So not sure about the EPA and what's to come with that. And so looking at, you know, there is a lot of wealth in San Diego. And so if we're looking at like solidarity as a community, is how are we mobilizing philanthropy in San Diego? And so there are also a lot of, you know, community-based organizations. We're already doing a lot of this work that's in this plan. And so how can we collaborate to uplift the work that's already happening to make it even more impactful, and then to really mobilize that, you know, the philanthropy that is in San Diego to kind of achieve some greater missions together. So that's all. I'll get off my get off the soapbox. Thank you.
Let me just address the first element you're talking about, which is it's a binational issue, the climate issue. And we agree. And I just want to kind of give you a teaser about an item that's going to come to you in the future, to your committee here. SANDAG has received a $2 million grant from Caltrans to look at a binational effort looking at climate adaptation and environmental justice. It's just kicking off this month. So February it's kicking off. So we're working on towards looking at a plan, kind of like we did for San Diego for the regional vision here, but looking at the binational effort of what can we do to promote climate adaptation, what can we promote to environmental justice issues, such as water quality, air quality. And so as those project kicks off, our team will be coming back to you with both the understanding what the project is, how we're collaborating with our neighbors to the south, and also to the east, where it's going to be also including Imperial County. So it's going to be ultimately a product that we hope can be brought forward into a future border master plan that includes not only transportation efforts, but also environmental justice and climate issues. So that's a teaser. We don't have a lot on it because we're just starting it off, but it's going to address the issue of binational focus.
I was just going to say, as for the other items too, we really welcome and encourage your input. So thank you so much, especially for the sectors that, like we said, we don't have as much say in here at SANDAG. Yeah, very welcome. So thank you for that.
Lakes, and then Lisa.
Hi. Sorry I'm late. I do have one question about the specific measure when it comes to tree canopy and the increase. Your objective is to increase the tree canopy mostly and to increase urban green spaces. And you've baked into your support and actions implementing green infrastructure or green stormwater infrastructure. And I'm curious if you can also maybe add an action that's going to support the maintenance of this green infrastructure, just because, especially because we're seeing so many climate incidents or climate related incidents happening in our surrounding areas, and how the maintenance, even though it's something that we, kind of write in, it's not really acted upon sometimes. So like really creating or forward thinking a plan for how we can maintain the green infrastructure and actually implement it so that we don't further, elevate these climate crises. Yeah, and I wonder too if a green infrastructure or green stormwater infrastructure could be a separate measure. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but I think of it. Like tree canopy is important, but people kind of group that as like, oh, that's just going to help with the urban heat index and cool down, which is related to climate, but green stormwater infrastructure is a little bit more related to water flow and I'm just curious if it might make sense to separate those two. So just a little suggestion there.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for that thought. We'll definitely consider it and look forward into it. We do consider another part of the measures is looking at milestones and remembering like to include the maintenance aspect of everything and making sure that we build systems and programs that continue and last for years to come, not just in that moment. So yeah, thank you for that comment.
Lisa?
Last comment. It's feedback to and encourage you all to do possibly a roundtable since you gave the teaser about the border focus. So there are several organizations in the San Diego region that were able to gain community change grant funding through the EPA, and the efforts and the outcomes of those projects are significant and should be kind of wrapped in part of the equation and the planning down the road. And the San Diego Foundation, EHC, Casa Familiar, just to name a few, and we're happy to provide more information on that.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Other comments, questions from members? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our next agenda item. That's number 4. And this is going to be an update on the San Isidro Mobility Hub and the Blue Line transit-oriented development projects. We are going to hear from Lizzie Havey and Zach Hernandez from SANDAG. Welcome, Zach and Lizzie.
Thanks, Paula. Good morning, working group members. Again, Zach Hernandez, planner here with my colleague, Lizzie Havey. Sorry, got to get the name right. But yeah, we're here to present a couple updates on multiple efforts that all kind of have the through line or a shared goal of improving how we serve our South Bay and our border and our cross-border communities, not just with mobility and transportation, but also with strategies to look at improving the urban context in and around a couple key stations to maximize the community benefit. But just to start out, to set a little context, I'll throw a couple numbers at you. Today, on any given day, over 90,000 people are crossing just northbound through the San Isidro Port of Entry, closer to 100,000 on a busier day. And for context, I don't know how many of you have attended a sold-out game at Petco Park or seen it on TV, but that stadium holds a little bit less than 45,000. So imagine 2 sold-out, Padre games every single day. That's the volume of people that are crossing just through the San Isidro Port of Entry alone on any given day. So 20,000 of those 90,000 are crossing on foot as pedestrians, and 14,000 of them are using transit, primarily the Blue Line trolley. And since 1981, when the Blue Line first started running, San Isidro has been since then and still is the kind of anchor for the regional transit system. But you really wouldn't guess that by seeing the way the station is laid out, the condition that it's in, and all the things that it's fighting against. But today it continues to be that major workhorse, despite a lot of limiting factors, which we'll talk about now. To talk about what it's like today, the feel of it, the words that I keep coming back to are hectic, sometimes chaotic, definitely very busy. But physically speaking, the station is incredibly small for the amount of demand that it facilitates. And that, coupled with the small size and the way it's laid out, the infrastructure and the different modes that are connecting there, it's very tangled. You have different modes that are overlapping, crisscrossing, causing conflict points. The infrastructure of the station itself is kind of tripping over itself. And in addition to that, there's a lot of disconnects. You can kind of feel when you're out there walking through the station that it wasn't really ever built to handle the foot traffic, for one, and the connections to and from and through the station weren't designed at the human scale. The biggest deficiency, or one of the biggest deficiencies, though, is that there's no room for additional transit service. Even if we had, more trolley and bus service ready to go tomorrow, there's no place to stage it. Keep in mind, out of the 90,000 who are crossing northbound every day, 70,000 of them are doing so in their personal vehicles, despite the long, unpredictable wait times adding to the poor air quality, which was just discussed. For them, a lot of those people, the Blue Line and the local 906, 907 routes simply isn't an option. So while we have a responsibility as kind of a long-range regional planning agency to look at the future, we also have an existing system that needs improvements. So over the last couple of years, SANDAG, MTS, City of San Diego, and Caltrans worked together to plan for more near-term improvements to the existing transit center, improving what we have out there today. So through lots of brainstorming sessions, stakeholder discussions, gathering community input, sharing ideas with station users, we came up with a couple different scenarios for how to get more life, more functionality out of the station. And what we came up with were different station redesign concepts, if you will, all of which achieve the things that you see bulleted on the screen, but it really comes down to a better human scale connectivity, more physical capacity for transit, and all while trying to accommodate the secure and sensitive needs of CBP operations happening through and just south of the station, and also trying to keep our footprint kind of minimal and limiting the impacts of private property so that we can actually turn dirt on this project sooner rather than later. And so we came up with a concept A, a concept B, and a concept C. We don't have too much time to get into all the nitty gritty, but I think the key highlight to pull out is that what we found was there are ways to improve and make a real change and a significant impact at the station with something as simple as even just shifting where the trolley platforms are by a couple 100 feet to really unlock and untangle the station itself, provide better operations, better flow, better pedestrian connectivity. So while we advance those things in the near term, we also know there's a need for a long-term vision, but this clip will just give you a sense of the existing condition and what it might look like with these near-term measures implemented. So that kind of covers our initial thinking around the near term. But in the long term, we know that there's an opportunity to think even bigger and to aspire for something even longer term and better and more innovative. Not just for transportation, but also for development in and around what is a major hub already and what really should be a major flagship station for the region, an incredible public space, a useful public space for the community that uses the facility. And that's where the San Ysidro Mobility Hub work really comes in. That's the long term. And looking towards that long term, we know there's a possibility for even more transit connections to the border, some of which are in the early planning stages or soon will be, and hopefully this group hears about them really soon. But with that in mind, apologies. With those kind of functional aspects, the future transit connections, the rail and the bus connections, how are people actually going to get to and from those things? The future mobility hub, the future facility, is going to need a design scheme that's both reflective of and responsive to the binational community that we have, driven by some of the creativity that we have here in San Diego, Tijuana, which was just kind of exemplified with World Design Capital. But in addition to that, a development strategy that includes creative ways to kind of integrate, leverage, and capitalize on development that's going to come with this bigger, longer-term investment in the station. So with both the near term and the long term working in parallel, think about both of these things as maybe a phase 1 and a phase 2 to our ultimate vision. Working in parallel and complementing each other, both the near term and the long term. We're excited that there's resources to advance some of this work. And as you look at this next slide, kind of think Russian nesting doll. I just kind of shared some thoughts now with a planning study behind us. We now have formulated ideas around what could happen in the near term to improve the station, to get more functionality out of it. And then in the long term, later this year, we're going to be starting some planning and community visioning exercises to understand what could come later. So in the longer term sense of things, what does the future rail connections look like? How do you fit that at such a small station? How does the community not just use, but also see themselves reflected in that ultimate build out? One really important aspect, though, that I've been hinting at is the need for a comprehensive strategy around all these future investments. One that includes not just transportation components, but captures the full benefits of a better station by complementing it with land use improvements that feed into and complement the transportation components. But for that, I'm going to turn it over to Lizzie to talk about another study that's helping us understand that component.
Thanks, Zach. The Blue Line Transit-Oriented Development Study, or Blue Line TOD study, is building off near-term infrastructure investments while providing a case study for TOD opportunities along the Blue Line trolley. The study also helps inform the long-term vision of the San Ysidro Mobility Hub, helping shape land use consideration, working alongside our stakeholders and cities. So not wanting to plan for transportation projects in a silo, the goal of this study is to plan holistically to maximize benefits of the transportation investments through complementary land use strategies. So a quick overview of what the study is. The Blue Line TOD study identifies opportunities for encouraging and creating TOD at and near two Blue Line trolley stations in South County, the San Ysidro Station and the Palomar Transit Center in the city of Chula Vista. You'll see examples for both stations throughout the presentation, but the same analysis was completed for each station. The study assesses land use, transportation, and market conditions to inform strategies for TOD implementation that highlight opportunities for potential development, community integration, and mobility improvements. Throughout the study, we worked closely with stakeholders from the City of San Diego, City of Chula Vista, MTS, and conducted outreach throughout the study, working alongside SBCS. We're making recommendations to the cities and MTS for proposed improvements to the public realm, land use updates, and policy considerations. Today, I'll be providing an overview over the process and key takeaways of the study as we're set to wrap up the final report. So for example, the Palomar Transit Center has high ridership numbers, vacant lots, and surface parking surrounded by commercial and residential land uses, as you see on the screen. SANDAG is currently planning for a number of investments, including a grade separation project, so allowing the trolley to go above and cars to go underneath, and rapid bus connecting Chula Vista to San Diego State University. Understanding these upcoming investments for Palomar, as well as those for San Ysidro, one of our key takeaways include making recommendations to maximize benefits by leveraging public investment for land use potential and capital improvement projects through informed TOD strategies. Early on in the study, for example, we looked at how the land is utilized compared to current zoning regulations. So what you see on a scale from dark green to red is that green areas have more capacity to support a greater density than the current conditions. We set out to analyze why and make corresponding recommendations. With initial analysis complete, we set out to measure opportunity for TOD. So again, this is just kind of giving an idea of the process that we went through. So this identified TOD potential to inform our overall report and some of the implementation strategies. So while SANDAG doesn't have land use authority, we're working closely again with our stakeholders to provide these recommendations. This task included utilizing the TOD index with scores for category, as you see, transit connectivity, walkability, bikeability, and corresponding subcategories. This provides a score at the parcel level to analyze TOD potential. Some of the implementation strategies in this next step of the study included outlining specific recommendations for these implementation strategies that included targeted outcomes and equity impacts. Here, the slide demonstrates opportunities in San Ysidro to leverage publicly owned land to help meet our regional housing goals, while also uplifting other placemaking strategies for land use development. So what we learned in this task and through our market analysis is that while we prepare or wait for the market to catch up, public agencies can invest in affordable housing, station, and public realm improvements at large. I would like to emphasize this study helps make recommendations in line with our public outreach, engagement with the business communities of these areas, and in coordination with the cities. The study is exploratory in nature, demonstrating process of identifying potential for TOD with complementary mobility improvements. So for example, the rendering you see is a concept highlighting the highest and best use of that site, but essentially is prototypical. However, the market analysis completed for the study provided those real numbers and can be scaled and applied throughout the study area and the sub-regional level. So some of these next steps include collaborating with stakeholders like city staff and affordable housing developers, leveraging the study for the San Ysidro Mobility Hub Planet work, that long-term vision, and further evaluating options for housing as an opportunity for transportation project mitigation, and exploring innovative project delivery models and financing mechanisms at the federal, state, and local level. And what that really means is how can we build projects, transportation projects, and utilize or leverage the same or different funding sources to build housing options at the same time. To zoom out a little bit to talk about all these things, how do Zach and I's projects relate? So this is a timeline of events highlighting the three different but intertwined efforts that we talked about today. So starting with the near-term improvements, Zach's near-term improvement study concluded in 2024, but we do have resources now to move forward some of the near-term improvements into the next phase of design and environmental. We'll develop an outreach plan to determine in these next phases where outreach will be crucial. But we'll see in 2025, some of that preliminary engineering begins. And then in 2026, some environmental phase begins too. And then for the long-term vision, the Blue Line TOD study really feeds into this long-term vision for the San Ysidro Mobility Hub, as well as some other efforts here in SANDAG relating to our sustainable community strategy. But this study concluded at the very end of 2024, and we're wrapping up the final report now. And then for the San Ysidro Mobility Hub, that long-term vision, we see that study starting this year in 2025, with opportunities in 2026 for draft mobility hub and land use development concepts, and in 2027, that long-term planning document kind of closing. And along that whole time, coordination with stakeholders and community engagement as well. With that, we can conclude the presentation and welcome any comments and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach and Lizzie. Do we have any public comments for this item?
Yes, we have one public comment. Cesar Javier, you may come up to the podium.
Transportation mobility, expertise of SANDAG, mandated and budgeted by the federal government. Wow, that's we call power. And thank you for the presentation. We learned from it and we will digest it on my behalf and my wife here as community volunteer. 2 minutes is not enough, but then thank you for that span of period. Let's further it by arastying, the keyword arasty, and speed it up. I wonder if we have some short-term approach. For instance, looking back, where this east-west railway, how this concept was put into actual. Could we play that kind of game so we could now put it while the geographic character would, shall we say, be utilized because it's still open, and project, look back, how this population grow. I will give you example, Metro Manila metropolitan area in the Philippines. 25 million humans. As big as, if I may make an estimate, part of San Diego region. You can Google that. How we survive, how we sustain. Perhaps you'll wonder why Uncle Cesar is here in America. I am not escaping from the challenge.
Thank you. And your
Thank
time
you,
has expired.
SANDAG.
And that concludes public comment.
Thank you, Clerk. Do members have questions or comments on this item? Lisa?
Okay, it's going to be a long one, right? I do want to say thank you for the way it was introduced to kind of really help folks understand how day-to-day life is right at the border, and for those who experience that daily. And then if you're crossing the border daily, just the kind of, hit on your quality of life that entails, and the militarization, and then in the future, potentially the increased harassment that's going to start. So, but to the core topic of this project and the potential of the project, referencing again my comments from the last meeting, that there's a lot of discontent right now in the community because of the border to Bayshore bikeway infrastructure, and that engagement that happened like 13, 14, 15, 16, like that clump of years, and then nothing happened, and no follow-up conversation until construction started last year, right? So there was so much that changed in the community, and a lot of housing, affordable housing increase in specific areas that really a deeper level of how certain neighborhoods were going to be impacted by that infrastructure. There was no real conversation on like the real design of it, right? It was always very, very high level. And so I'm hoping that you don't allow that to happen again for the opportunities and the planning and the design of the 5 to 10 year possibilities. And I think it can be very distracting when might get excited or might get really, really upset about the potential of hearing a ton more affordable housing before addressing like the opportunities that we have in the next 5 to 10 years. And hopefully a way to separate that and understand the engagement timeline for both of those things distinctively so that it's not so we're not combining conversations on something that we might not, I might not live to see, right? And a lot of people in the community, let's focus first on the things that we really might be able to see in the next 5 to 10 years. And CASA and a lot of people in San Isidro have been very, very vocal and very, very upset about the conditions or lack thereof of bathrooms, of public restrooms. So you mentioned the amount of pedestrians, let alone the vehicles that cross on a daily basis. And when those 14,000, is that what you mentioned? 20,000?
20,000 across, 14,000 using transit.
20,000 using transit, 14,000, 20,000 that cross. I think there's 4 or 5 stalls.
Yeah, around there. I think it's 5.
So 5 stalls, they're not always working all at the same time. They look like little cages. I've mentioned that before. I mean, you can see people's feet if you're walking by. You have to pay, is it still 25 cents or is it now a little bit more?
I think it's more than that. I'd have to check though.
50 cents, I think, perhaps. And if you don't have exact change, then you don't get to use the bathroom. And so you can imagine how the businesses are impacted and just the quality of life after having to wait who knows how long standing to cross the border and to get into access transit and do all the things. If we're not talking about bathrooms first, you're going to have a very angry community. And we need to collaborate with MTS. So let's have those separate conversations. Let's not jumble them up is my plea and beg. Like, let's focus on the now, and then later, let's talk about the visioning process or completely different times to do those things. So there's just, and when the big visioning, the only thing I'm gonna drop is we're having to have a lot of community meetings to help recover and get people open again because of a really badly handled SANDAG presentation and community meeting in October. So let's go really big and let's think 15-minute communities. How do you access everything in my daily life within 15 minutes walking distance if you're gonna go that big? Because that community deserves it. And there's things that the community doesn't even have, like a pharmacy right now. So let's do a study on all the things San Isidro doesn't have access to within its own community to help shape that bigger vision. Thank you.
Other comments from members?
I have one. Oh, I had this on the whole time. Thanks for your presentation. Kind of piggybacking on what Lisa said, she identified a lot of the concerns that San Isidro as a community deals with every day, or the lack of certain resources or amenities. And I would also maybe go towards doing a study of what the assets of that community are and how and what exists, especially because it's right on the border. There's a lot of culture there, a lot of arts that are happening. I know that the city of San Diego just became a creative city or something like this. I don't know. Dig into that. Quote me later. But it might be a good opportunity to, one, leverage that and make it a multimodal project, right? But two, also identifying, what is the culture of San Isidro and how can you use that asset to enhance the vision of your mobility hub and your transit center and all the other things that you're trying to do regarding transit That would be my only comment.
Other comments? Jesse?
Yeah, I think all the comments on the short-term improvements, I think those are important conversations, but I think too, like, so to me, when I think of the San Isidro transit station, it's just really, really small, you know, and there's a lot of conflicts, right? You have people walking the trolley, you have cars turning like right, and then you have a huge bus, and the space is just very, very tiny. So I think like in the future, like I'm just wondering, I feel like there's a lot of like land use opportunities in there too. I know a lot of the space nearby is dedicated for like overnight parking, but I think as we look into making these improvements, those land uses that are currently, or how land is currently being used, might become obsolete over time, right? Like let's say like when the dream world we're able to improve the transit system and more folks start to use it, there might not be as many folks using the parking spaces. So there might be an opportunity, you know, there. Obviously, that's like a bigger conversation, and I think there would be an opportunity to include some of the assets, you know, and that the residents of San Isidro need in those conversations as well, and just get creative with the land use, because I think right now it's just, if you ask me, it's kind of like a waste of space, just cars sitting there. Sometimes, you know, there's not a lot of people are using it either. It just depends on like the holidays or the days of the week. So just some ideas.
Thanks, Jesse. Yep.
I didn't say community benefits agreement, so I'm going to say that every single time this one comes up. So it's such a huge investment that's going to have to happen, and I just want to make it really clear that the community and Casa Familiar is going to push very hard for a community benefits agreement.
That it? Okay. Thank you, Zach and Lizzie.
Thank you all.
Okay, moving on to item number 5. I'm going to share a quick overview of our charter. I know it's been a long time since we've done that. And I want us to have a discussion on our work plan for 2025. I'm just going to stay here instead of going back and forth. Do we have, I'm going to get all messed up here. Do we have any comments from members of the public for this item?
Yes, we have one public comment. Cesar Javier, you may come up to the podium.
Thank you, SANDAG. You see, we're learning. The progress, I would say, in Carlsbad is something to envy. Why? They are able to solve with that political power to put up a desalination plant. And a small but terrible idea, they were also able to stop cigarette or whatever is smoking in public. Thank you. That's a good example of governance. And very touching because they targeted bullseye clean water. Why? Because along with it, they are also cleaning at the same time the dirt coming from the process of desalination. Have we observed fire crisis in Carlsbad? Minimum. At least we are given that inspiration that if we could only put adequate source of water, not buying from Colorado because some other places need that. That's a great leap to what we call equity. That's what we are working all about. This is focused on circulation, mobility, transportation, and communication. Bullseye, Carlsbad, and we are grateful that she is the chair of this working group committee. She will be, I mean, let's give credit to that. Deep in our hearts, from District 9, West Bank of Cholas Creek, City Heights, you are on the right Manning chart, your name. That's what we need in governance. the accountable responsible officer is working. Hopefully, even the CEO and the co-chair of this SANDAG.
Thank you, and your time has expired. And that concludes public comment.
Okay, thank you, Kat. And thank you, Kendall and Daniel, for running the slides. So it's been a while since we've talked about the charter, probably not at least in the 2 years that I've been here. So we thought it was a good opportunity to sort of bring that back up, make sure folks had reviewed it. It was an attachment. Hopefully you all did. And then, of course, we want to take the opportunity to talk about what this group wants to see in 2025. 2 great topics already today in January. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm not going to run through all of the topic areas, but we will sort of just touch on a couple, starting with the purpose of this working group. I think we all know, but I'll just reiterate: to provide ongoing input from the public, from disadvantaged or underrepresented communities in the region for the purposes of the development and then the implementation of the regional plan, as well as other related planning activities, right? Something that we do every single month. And then the big piece for this working group is all through the lens of social equity, right? So then up to our next slide, please. This working group, I think this is a good slide just to show where this working group is at in terms of all of the committees and the board of directors here at SANDAG. So this working group reports up to the Regional Planning Committee, which is made up of elected officials. That committee reports up to the SANDAG board of directors. I did want to make a mention about this group's chair. It is appointed by the SANDAG board. Chair. Thank you very much, Suri. And so our chair, we want to thank City of Carlsbad Mayor Pro Tem Bhat Patel, who was our chair in 2024. She will not be our chair in 2025. The board chair will be making new appointments at the February 14th meeting. So basically stay tuned. And that's why I'm up here again today. We could go to the next slide, please. Responsibilities of this working group. Another thing that I feel like you all are very aware. Here's just some examples. Of course, the regional plan. We're going to continue to hear about the regional plan in 2025. It's going to be a big year for regional plan. We expect that it will go to the board and be adopted in December of 2025. Youth Opportunity Pass. This group has been instrumental in the Youth Opportunity Pass, and we know that you're still talking about the Youth Opportunity Pass in your communities and helping get youth get their passes authorized. I know that's an issue still for many folks, and we're still working on that. We recently heard about the 6 new rapid routes. We'll continue to hear about, some of these big transportation projects that we're working on. Small sample. We want to hear more, like what else do we want to talk about and work on this year? But just wanted to share that. If we could go on to the next slide, please. You all know who you are. I think everyone's familiar with this great map that we use a lot on the right side of the screen, but I wanted to use this slide because I think that these numbers are very impressive. I mean, more than 2,100 outreach events that have been hosted by all of you since 2018, where somebody on your staff or maybe even you talked about the regional plan, shared some regional plan information. That really translates to a big impact in terms of people who are hearing and talking about the regional plan who probably otherwise wouldn't be engaged or involved. And honestly, I think this number, like, we were trying to be conservative with it, but it made me really happy to update that. And then, more than 60 meetings of this working group since 2018. Kind of some big numbers there. And next slide, please. That was it. This was a short presentation before we, actually, we already did the public comments. So that's all I had in terms of what I wanted to share with you all. And like I said, I think now I would love to just open it up and hear from members what should this group be looking at, or talking about? What presentations do we want to make sure that come to this working group in 2025? I think in the past, you know, we would do it monthly, like what do people want to see? And then we have this very big list, but perhaps we could be a little more organized, and that way we can schedule out the year from the get-go. So I will stop talking and open it up to you all.
Thank you. This is nice to for us to have time to do strategy. I feel like we don't always get to do that with this group, so appreciate the opportunity. Just like right off the bat, I think having an overview of the budget and how things are funded and timelines and all of that is really important, since that's how this, you know, work moves forward.
Great suggestion. Thank you. Lisa?
Sorry, I was trying to be quiet. I didn't want to take up too much space because I know I've been talking a lot today. I think being able to kind of map out all the positive work that's happening and how those things can connect with different jurisdictions and SANDAG more. And if there are funding gaps with specific parts of those projects that are active, how to identify completion of those projects, or preventing slowdown of projects if gaps come up, right? And getting to what is within our control, between SANDAG, MTS, and the organizations that you bring together on a regular basis would be great.
Yep.
And the border stuff, of course, I think there's just so much kind of triangulating of the huge binational things that and conversations that are going to be happening, but at the very local level, there's a lot of work happening as well, and so we need to bridge those conversations and efforts, I think, too.
Thank you. Good points.
I think what I'm hearing most from my community is about flexible fleets in the last mile. So, because I work a lot with families who only have one vehicle and that vehicle's at work every day, they're taking transit, but they're having difficulties because they have small children, they have strollers, or they're seniors. And getting that last mile, our transit stations in El Cajon are not convenient to anything really. So everything requires additional transportation, either it's an additional bus ride or flexible fleets. So they're very excited about flexible fleets if we could continue that discussion. But I think just knowing what projects are going on in other communities, surrounding communities, so that we can share that information, that would be very helpful as well too.
Jesse?
I think too, so the ICC, we do a lot of like housing work, affordable housing. So I know SANDAG, that's under SANDAG's purview too. SANDAG does a lot of affordable housing, anti-displacement work. But like we don't really talk about it, but I think it'd be great if we can just like get updates on the different efforts that the agency is doing, because I think that's important for all of the communities that we serve.
Thank you.
Yeah, I meant to speak on housing too. I think we get a lot of presentations here about the great plans of what we're going to do, but I just feel like we don't get as much data about, okay, this has been done and this is how it went. Like, there's the housing toolkit that they're going to use with the cities to encourage them. Did the cities actually pick it up? Did the cities, are they actually implementing it? How did the housing stock change? How did the housing prices change in the communities that we serve? Same thing with like the EVs, right? I think there's a lot of efforts to promote it. Like, has it been going up? I don't know. And yeah, I think just generally like the transit investments, it's like we want to increase it more. Okay, by how much did we increase the transit investments in 2024? By how much do we plan to increase transit investments by 2025? And by how much did we actually increase it? Thank you.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah, Kathy.
One of the things, and it's going back to what Lisa was saying about the San Ysidro hub, is we happen to, SBCS has 3 affordable housing projects right around the Palomar hub. And as I was sitting here, I was thinking about the additional money it cost us on those affordable housing projects because we are near the trolley station. And a lot of them were safety for our residents and that sort of thing. So maybe when you look at the thing in San Ysidro and building housing around it, the cost for that provider or that developer is increased in order, because you've got a lot of people coming in and out. So we've had to do a lot of additional things.
Thank you. Jennifer?
So I'm kind of piggybacking off of Bellen's comment. Not only, just receiving these plans and roadmaps with all the different objectives and action items, it would be interesting to know, or helpful, I think, to know what resources are available to the local jurisdictions or other agencies that are supposed to be implementing these suggestions and recommendations so that we can see whether or not they are actually effective. Whether that's us collaborating with local jurisdictions about these projects or about these recommendations, offering some kind of assistance or solutions. But I think it would be helpful because we can plan all day long, but if we don't know how to implement these plans, then they're really kind of a waste of time in a way. So it would be interesting to know what happens after the plans are given to local jurisdictions or other agencies and where they go with those next steps.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're not alone in that sentiment. Definitely hearing that on other projects. Carol?
I think one thing that we don't hear real often is what policies are coming down from the state. If we could have more information about what policies, I think we'll start seeing, different ones coming and changes in the next few years. So if we could have updates regularly about maybe some policies, things that we could be advocating for, or, sending letters in on behalf of our organizations or supporting.
That's a great idea. We've had like policy updates at other groups that folks are involved in here at SANDAG, but not in this group.
In addition to that, maybe local jurisdiction policies, because I'm going back to the comment you made about the tree canopies. And I know that some of the local cities on developments make you give a maintenance plan of your landscaping. And I wonder which of the jurisdictions do that and which do not do that. And for those who do it, what's the enforcement and how does it get enforced?
I think I haven't seen it here yet. We haven't talked about it, but it's definitely something that I think about a lot because it's happening a lot. But disaster preparedness and baking that into our regional plan, how prepared is this region or our city for any type of disaster, and how can we enforce that if, push comes to shove and we need to combat something. I don't know what that would look like, or maybe it takes up like a feasibility of like how, what would the city of San Diego do if it was to be hit by a firestorm like LA was just hit, or what if another flooding occurred? What are the most vulnerable areas in San Diego? If we can identify those areas, then we can start creating a plan of, where people should go for refuge and, what kind of resources are available for to avoid any further crises.
I keep, as folks are talking, thinking about that activity that we shared recently of like, how does, no, not the how does an idea become a plan? That one's a good one too, but the kind of what jurisdiction is responsible for what. It sounds like a lot of may be helpful to like do it by topic area, like here's what the cities do, here's what SANDAG does, here's what the county does. Maybe that's something we could work on.
Good for our communities.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's helpful for folks just for understanding. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Fair.
I'm just gonna kind of piggyback and express agreement on a lot of the topics that have come up. I think what we find a lot is people want to see like what has changed because of my involvement. And if we're engaging people, I think we've been involved in this for like 7 years now or something. And so if people are like, well, you keep asking for my feedback, you keep asking for my feedback, and what has happened, it's hard to stay engaged, right? And so I think celebrating our wins, like the YOP is a huge win for us to be able to say like, hey, because of your involvement, now our youth have this opportunity. And so continuing to uplift those things when they do happen so we can keep people involved for the long haul, I think is really important. Kind of like disaster preparedness. And then I think along with that is just like looking at the political climate, and I might call it a disaster, but right, there's like challenges that are going to come and will continue, and whoever knows what happens. So like, what are we going to do to prepare for that? Like, how can we prepare for that? How can we commit to being in solidarity and to the values and the commitments that we've already made to reducing greenhouse gases in our communities, regardless of what happens, right, at different levels. So I don't know what that looks like, but I think it's important. And then kind of going back to this local jurisdiction piece is when, we do have like the anti-displacement, strategies that come out. Can we go with SANDAG to our local representative and sit down and say, hey, we worked on this together. Your community members, helped to develop this. And we, alongside our colleagues in SANDAG, are saying like this, this is the strategy going forward, because I do think a lot of times it gets lost in the middle, and maybe SANDAG and the jurisdiction is talking, and maybe we're talking to our elected representatives, but without us coming together, I think there's less buy-in from local jurisdictions, because, oftentimes they're like, oh yeah, I hear from you all the time, whatever, so there is more teeth to it when we come, together. So looking at some strategies for more solidarity and the policy piece, I think.
We hear you on the sort of closing the loop with community members, and just for your information, we are going to be talking with the outreach team folks. And I know our outreach team is already thinking through okay, what are some wins? What are some examples that we can share and say hey, here's what's happened since the last time you did this, as we're preparing to bring the draft out into the community, which even just from a personal level, yeah, it makes sense. Oh, that's why I should continue to be involved, because look, we were talking about this 4 years ago, and now we have the Youth Opportunity Path. Any other comments? Okay, we'll put this list together and perhaps bring it back as a more formalized work plan for 2025. Where are we at? We are at our final item number 6, which is our adjournment. And clerk, do we have public comments on this item?
Yes, we have one public comment. Cesar Javier, you may come up to the podium.
Of course, there is always conclusion or summary. We are happy. We are inspired because of the performance of these working groups, particularly the human idea that we must be prepared. Anything we do to protect humans, we must be prepared in all aspects of urban planning. Elements shell, man and his shelter, our society. And the last one, which is the last element of the efforts of SANDAG, mobility, circulation, probably include communication. Man is the center of that young lady who mentioned, hey, let's plan for preparedness. We have lots of evidences, proofs. Tijuana River issue, the hotspots in the city of San Diego regarding air pollution. Let's just remember three things: clean air, clean water, clean food. I think we could survive against neighborhoods that are not protected by the police or the residents themselves. In doing so, we experienced. We were the ones restrained by justice. Hey, Mr. Saber, do not put your radio on preaching and religious practices because it affects your neighbor. Or Mr. Javier, don't use your jackhammer because it is loud, when in fact we are just conforming with the advice of IPA, Mr. Javier, to solve your issue, plant more trees along the boundary line to suppress the toxicity on the downwind. Weird. We think of governance. We think of Arasti. We think of the basic, protect ourselves because nature is.
Thank you. Your time has expired. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you. If we have no other comments, I will just remind you all that our next meeting is going to take place Thursday, February 13th, which is our joint.
Public comment has concluded, sir.
Just a final reminder, our next meeting is going to be the joint working group meeting on February 13th at the Central Public Library. I hope to see you all there. And then we will keep our normal social equity working group meeting here on February 27th. We are adjourned at 11:09. Thank you, everyone.